about presentation. And I think this is definitely an area that does not get enough attention. We work very hard creating assets or materials or objects or whatever it is to present as a portfolio piece with the intention of getting somebody to want to think about hiring us. You guys are familiar with portfolios? The whole purpose of creating a portfolio is your work, basically, on display. And what's very difficult about having your work on display is you're not there to defend it. You can't explain things. You can't do anything. Literally, you are just offering yourself up to whoever is looking at it for them to judge you. And what is critically important about your work is not only do you do great work, because that's a given, you got to do great work, but not only do you have to do great work, but you have to show off your work in such a way that you're actually getting somebody's attention. Because something that is very important for you to understand, even at this early stage, is that we are a shiny object species. We love shiny things. We love them. We love to look at them. We're mesmerized for hours by shininess. So you've got to find a way to make your work shiny so that you can get somebody's attention. You know, it's just like nature. There's always, you know, 10,000 guys, and the female has her pick of whichever one she wants. So you got to have the brightest feathers or the best dance or whatever it is in order to be successful and continue on. So what we're trying to do here is find out what elements present your work well. How do I show it off well? Because honestly, I've literally been in a room where we're sitting down looking at 2 demo reels for 2 different prospective students to hire. And when you look at one reel, it's definitely shinier than the other one. It's more slick, fun to watch. And one of them definitely shows technical superiority. And unfortunately, which demo reel do you think won?
The shiny one.
The shiny one won. Because we will take shiny over sustenance, apparently, in many occasions. So what we have to do is not only create great work, but don't drop the ball on presentation. It's really important that you show your work off in the best possible light and create the best possible, again, presentation or display for your work. And whether it's an image that is a still image or whether we're talking about moving images, what we're talking about is making pretty rectangles. And that's our job. We make pretty rectangles. So what we're going to talk about today is, again, the ideas of presentation. How do I make my work look good? And what we're going to do is talk about elements of composition, because composition is a huge part of making a pretty rectangle. And hopefully a lot of this stuff is stuff you've already been talking about in Art 1. And again, this is where these arts sort of converge. And really it's obvious how they play off of each other. Piece of paper, image, same thing. So what we're going to be looking at is, I guess, a series of Amber Alerts. But what we're also going to be looking at is how do I make my work look better? How do I show it off well? Because I think too many people, once they finish the work, whatever it is they've made, they're like, okay, oof, I'm done. And they just kind of big exhale, and, you know, they're going to love it. But you really got to take it that last little bit, and that makes the difference between your level of success and getting somebody's attention. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some elements of design, and these are going to help you make better calls in terms of how do I present my work compositionally. And the way this plays into the class is, as you know, we are going to be creating a final scene, and we're going to be arranging objects within the scene, and this is kind of like your portfolio. If somebody says, hey, send me an image of your work, okay, I'm going to send you one picture of what I can do. Well, it better be a really good picture, because I might not get another chance at this opportunity. Does that make sense? Good hell yeah on that? Okay, good. So let's take a look. And again, just to give you an idea of the difference it can make in terms of composition, I just want to show you some past examples from this class. And I know I've showed them before, but what I want you to realize in looking at these is everybody's building the same thing. There's no real difference in the assets being used. but some of these images are definitely significantly more interesting to look at than others. So what I just want you to note at this point is why am I liking that image versus the one right before, which is virtually the same thing? And again, how do I set myself apart from everyone else? So again, if you look at these images, none of them are bad, but some of them are definitely much more interesting to look at than others. And again, how can I make my work more interesting to look at? And what we're talking about is presentation. Is this making sense for you in terms of what I'm talking about? Okay. So again, when you look at these projects, everybody's building the same things, but it's the presentation that makes one of them more interesting to look at than another. That's a terrific one. And again, these are a variety of projects. A, B, C is immaterial because it's really about catching somebody's eye. Nobody's going to look at your work and say, wow, their work's not very good, but they did get straight A's. Does that make sense? Not going to get you the job. I'm particularly fond of this one. It does, absolutely. That is the one thing I do let you guys play with. If you have like a magnifying glass in your scene or a camera lens, you can make that glass. And believe it or not, you have the ability and the knowledge to make it do that. If you had to guess, what do you think is causing that? It's got a different material on it, right? And there's some refraction, which is probably an attribute of the material. Does that make sense? So think about things in terms of, can I make an adjustment to an attribute? Absolutely. Again, just in the instances where we're talking about a camera lens or a magnifying glass. I don't want you guys to make the beer bottles clear, or because now we're getting into a lot of glass, and shiny is expensive when we're talking about render time. And I don't want you to get into a situation where it takes too long for your image to be rendered. Does that make sense? So a little bit is good. I don't want you to turn everything in your scene to glass. Does that make sense? Okay, because that would be a problem. Yeah.
On some of these images, I'm seeing what you call the dirt pass.
Yes.
A lot of these images have ambient occlusion.
They do. They do. I'm glad you noticed that. And what you notice from that is they actually look better with that ambient occlusion pass on there, significantly better. Do you have to do an ambient occlusion and include that in your final render? No, not at all. That is not a graded requirement. You don't have to do that. Will your work look a lot better if you do? Yeah, it will. Do you know how to do that? Yeah, you do. So the call is yours. Spend the time where you need to and realize that how you show yourself, that's how people see you. Yes?
I know it probably doesn't
no.
It doesn't matter which model we use.
Well, we're going to talk about the details of that specifically all at once, but it is on the activity as well. But I will tell everybody at one time when we get to that point.
Second question. For the ambient occlusion pass
Mm-hmm.
and for the models in our render, I know it'd probably be advisable to UV map them, but based on the time constraints that we're under, would it be possible to ambient occlusion map without UV mapping? Or will that become
unfortunately, no. The question is, can you create an ambient occlusion pass for something you have not laid out the UVs for? And unfortunately, the answer to that is no. You must UV map in order to create ambient occlusion. Because
I noticed we had to do the maps for the ambient occlusion, so I thought it
yes.
might be the same thing.
Yeah, that's why we have to do a UV layout, because basically what we are asking Arnold to do when we apply this material is, hey, Arnold, here's this object with all this complex shape change and curvature to it. Light is shining on it. it creates some shadows. Can you record that shadow information? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So as a result, if you don't have good UV layout, it can't figure out where to put the shadows, because UV layout is organization by definition.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
No, you can't have B without A. But that's a good question. All right, so let's talk a little bit about presentation, because this is going to make a big difference for our work, showing it off. Presentation matters. It has a big part of the pie in terms of the attractiveness of your work. Now, if you're trying to create a nice arrangement, you can just like move stuff around. That's, you know, easy enough. Does it look good here? Does it look good here? I don't know, closer, further. Eventually, if you noodle long enough, you'll come up with something that works. But the problem is, you and I do not have the kind of time where we can just sit around and noodle with stuff endlessly until we arrive at what looks good. So what we've got to do is come up with a way to minimize the guessing and go with what's working. Now, the way we can do that is using what we call the principles of design. And the principles of design are the idea that when you look at two images, you say this is a more interesting image than this. So what happens is people who study art got together and said, hey, what are the similarities between images that people like to look at, and how are they different from images that people aren't as interested at looking at? And then they took these ideas and they kind of gave them names to explain what makes an image interesting. Now, why this is helpful to us is we don't have to spend hours messing with stuff to make it look good. We can go right to these principles and just use them. They are shortcuts. They will save us a tremendous amount of time because we already know the ideas behind what makes an image more attractive. Does that make sense? So it minimizes the guessing and increases the speed at which you can create a nice looking image. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of these disciplines, principles of design. And again, I'll give you some examples of what they mean. And what we're going to do after that is we're going to take a look at an image, professional artwork. And then since you are more familiar with these terms, now you'll be able to tell me the principles of design that you see in this artwork that I show you. So first, let's talk about balance. Balance is the idea that images have weight to them, okay, in terms of their positive and negative space. So positive space being the objects of interest, negative space being the somewhat muted background. Now, everything will have a weight to it, or a visual sense of weight. And when you have balance in an image, that weight seems to be even. What is interesting to point out about this balance concept is that, or rules in general when it comes to art, in some instances, the opposite of a rule is actually what makes it a powerful idea. So you also have asymmetrical balance, where one element is significantly visually heavier than the other one, and that's what actually makes it more interesting to look at. Or perhaps one has been significantly diminished, and therefore it empowers it based on the amount of negative space around it. Does that make sense? So balance can go two ways with that, but excellent way to make things more interesting to look at. This symbol is the definition of balance, pretty much. But again, there's something visually pleasing about images that exhibit balance. It's soothing to a certain degree. Contrast. The idea of contrast is we can use that to draw emphasis to elements. So for example, if you look at this image here, you can see there's not a lot of detail on the surface of these Lego guys. But this one is actually much more crisp in terms of the contrast against the imagery. And it's not necessarily color, but just the fact that there is more detail in there, more depth to the detail, it's a strong contrast between these elements. So it sort of drives the eye to elements that are important. I'd like you to think of images as kind of like an amusement ride. And it's the ride of your creativity and your mind and your vision. And what you want to do is take people on that ride. And as I said, we are a shiny object species. We love to look at shiny things. But also, which is a bit of a negative. We are a short attention span species. We don't like to look at anything for very long. So the point is, not only does my work have to look great, it's got to look great right away. I can't have people have to study my stuff to figure out what they should be looking at. We just lose interest very quickly, unfortunately. So what we need to do is help the eye, and we direct it to where we want it to go when we want it to go there. And that's not just still images, it's moving images as well. So again, contrast can help drive where people are looking and maximize the impact of the image right away. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, in terms of contrast, also element of balance here. These contrast elements empower the image. For example, if you take a look at this one here, if you could imagine if this element was white and this element was black, this image would not be as powerful as it is. We are drawn in and we focus on this based on this particular use of contrast for this image. It empowers it. Does that make sense? The contrast between those. All right. Movement is the idea that there's sort of a flow to your image, and you can literally, again, pull the eye through the frame in the way that you want them to see things. And again, it communicates a visual movement within the frame. So, for example, as a species, well, not as a species, but as Western worlders, North American centricites, we typically read from left to right and top to bottom. We tend to look at images that way too. So if I look at an image, I'm usually starting in the top left, and then I'm working my way down and across. So in order to get somebody to look somewhere else, you have to sort of overpower the natural tendencies. So in this instance, I'm using this visual element here. Again, I am starting with the left, which is something that's working for us from go. But you can see I'm drawing the eye through the frame, using that as a guide to pull you through the image you're looking at. Similar thing going on here with these columns. I can't help but acknowledge these things, but where are they telling me to look? They're pulling me down into here towards the doorway of that temple. So I'm being shown where to look, and that movement travels the eye to where I want it to look. Okay, emphasis. Emphasis is the idea that we can draw attention to a particular element of an image and make it more powerful or important than other elements. And there's a variety of different ways that we can do that. In this instance, this character is much larger than the others, so you can't help but acknowledge the fact that it occupies the most space. In some instances, emphasis can be utilized with color. There's a whole world of circles out here, but I know which one I'm supposed to be looking at, the red one. All right. Some elements of emphasis, again, proximity to the camera will give an element of emphasis. But some elements of emphasis are sort of intellectually based. The idea that why is this apple sitting here perfectly in the middle of what looks like a track or a road or something is completely out of place. So again, visually, yes, it's right in my face, but also on an intellectual level, that's not where that should be. So that itself creates an element of emphasis because it's out of its element in terms of where you would expect to see that. All of these things create emphasis or make it to be more important. Now, pattern is the idea that we can have something that repeats. It's a visual repetition, but it is very brief. It is very short, very simple. This is a pattern. Again, patterns create predictability and, again, are visually pleasing. It's almost like you know what's going to happen next, so as a result, you know, your mind just sort of knows what to expect, and it sort of just allows that to happen. Again, visually, it becomes predictable and, again, soothing visually. We like that. Patterns are terrific. Hawaiian shirts are among my favorites. Now, rhythm is a little bit different than pattern in that rhythm is a little bit deeper. There's more to it. It's more complex. As its name implies, more like a song. When you listen to a song, there's not necessarily a pattern to it, but you know when the chorus is going to come back in. You start to remember how these things come together. There's an element of symmetry almost to it in terms of the way things occur. And this can happen visually as well. So again, a little bit more complex than the idea of the pattern, but still an element of predictability to it, what you expect to happen next visually.
My question about, what about optical illusions?
What about optical illusions? Well, I tell you, optical illusions are cool. They are definitely fun. Some of them require more attention than others in order for them to work. I don't know if have you guys ever seen those pictures where if you stare at it long enough, you see a different picture in it? You know, that's an optical illusion. I got to be honest with you, I can't get those things to work. I don't know if I'm not from this planet or what, but I look at those things and they're like, ooh, look, a fire truck. Yeah, a fire truck. I don't see it. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong. But again, something you have to bear in mind is an optical illusion is interesting if it gets the attention and it can be resolved quickly. My only concern with optical illusions is if it takes too much thought, you're going to lose somebody. You know what I mean? It's like we would love a poem or even better, a haiku. So if you write me a story, you may lose me. Does that make sense? Get it across in a haiku if at all possible. Poem is okay too. Don't give me a book because you're going to lose me unless there's lots of pictures. But point being, visual tricks, again, if it's a simple one, that could be fun. That could be something that would get somebody's attention. Just be careful if it takes too much time to understand. That would be my only worry. An interesting question, though. Never got that one before. All right. So again, in terms of composition, we're trying to create a really pretty image. And I want to utilize these principles of design because they're going to help me make better choices for placement of objects, and they're going to help me do it much more quickly because I don't have to noodle with things, you know, at length to figure out what looks good. I can just bring those things in, use these ideas, these principles of design, move the stuff around quickly and get the kind of thing I want out of my image, and then get that thing rendering so I can see it. So composition is definitely going to be an element that we're looking for when you guys do your render. So you know how to import objects, you know how to create and apply an AO path. We've already been in the room and we've done renders within the room. So then the last little piece of our puzzle for this class is, how do I arrange the stuff that I've built in an interesting and fun way that catches the eye of the viewer, that will set my work apart from everyone else, because I want that job. I want them to remember mine, not everybody else who applied. Because I got news for you. Every modeler who applies for a job, not every, that's a bad choice of words, but the overwhelming majority have mechs on their reel. They have X-Wings on their reel. They have anime characters on their reel. So how do I make my stuff look better? Presentation. And a big piece of that presentation is composition of the image. Lighting is also a tremendous complement to making your work look better. Good lighting can make average work look really good. Also, compositing will make your demo reel flashy and slick. Don't overlook any of those things. Your demo reel is a little TV show. It's a very brief one, and it's got to be amazing. Again, the haiku, wherever possible, not the long story. Does that make sense? You got to win them in a second, because it's about all you get sometimes. I would love to talk about lighting more. I love lighting because, well, I come from the film background. I worked in the film industry, TV commercials, music videos, special effects segments for TV movies and that kind of thing. I really adore what lighting can do for you. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to incorporate that into my class as well. But what I would say is lighting is a night and day difference, pun intended, in terms of how you see things. Think about very powerful films that you've seen, very powerful and immersive games that you've played, and think about the lighting, because I guarantee you lighting was a huge piece of how you felt, the way you felt about what you were looking at. You know, there's a reason The Natural is a beautiful film. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but it is a gorgeous movie. It's about baseball, but point being, they wanted to make that film magical and epic. So what they did was they actually filmed that movie at only specific times of the day, called golden hour, when the sun is first rising and when the sun is setting. It has a different quality to it because the sun is low in the horizon, so that the light waves that you're receiving are more through the red-orange spectrum in terms of the Roy G. Biv rainbow of color. And overall, everything has this warm glow to it. And it's very expensive to film that way, and to my knowledge, they never did that again. But for this movie, they did it, and when you watch that film, you feel like something special is happening. And it definitely takes. What's that? The Natural. That's a great film. And then you can turn around and look at other films, you know, gothic horror films. I don't know how many of you guys saw the original Alien, okay? Blade Runner. I mean, man, the Scots can light. Light tells a story. Light is a character in your story, without doubt. Again, I could go on for hours on it. But point being, is light important? Definitely. That's a very good question. I would start off by looking at your video Lynda tutorials. Hopefully you guys, through that discussion point where we were trying to get you to take a look at Lynda videos, start looking at what the professionals do there. But realize that good lighting is good lighting, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're talking about Maya, whether you're talking about a multi-million-dollar movie studio lighting set, or whether you're talking about setting up a couple of lights on your back porch and trying to take a picture. Light is light, and what makes a good image good is the same across the boards. So you could get yourself a book on photography and just study the light and what's the light doing, and realize that there are lights in Maya as well that help you light, and you're going to use the same ideas that you use in photography, in filmmaking, as well as rendering, you know, the most epic film you've ever seen. All the same ideas. It's just, what's the tool that does what I need it to do? Does that make sense? Very concept-driven lighting.
There is a book in our library called Shot by Shot.
Oh, I don't know that one. Is it?
A lot of pictures, and it's about, you know, the film industry, where all of our lighting and our techniques come from.
Yep.
Right? So it's camera staging and light setup. Let's take a look at that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Shot by Shot. That's a great one to go look at then. I have not heard of that one. That doesn't mean it's not awesome.
Yeah, you would love it.
I probably would. I probably would. I'm a huge fan of light. Yeah. Sure. Color and Light by James Gurney. I've not heard of that one, but yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm sure, like I said, yeah. Yes. And honestly, when I was first learning how to light, what we did was literally bring lights into the classroom, set up an object on a table, and let's just play with it for a little while. Because again, light is a very simple thing, but it's a powerful thing. But it's easy to study. So I recommend it highly. And the good news is we have a whole class on shading and lighting. So when you guys get to that class, the guy who lit the scene you guys are using for this project will be there teaching you how to do shading and lighting. And he's awesome. He knows that stuff inside and out. So he will give you the digital what for when it comes to lighting. Absolutely. But what I would say is if you have interest in light, start looking into it now. Start reading books on it. Because again, it doesn't matter if it's a book on photography, a book on filmmaking, digital work. Doesn't make any difference. It's all the same thing. Where's my camera? Where are my lights? And what emotion am I going to conjure in doing what I'm doing? that make sense? Because you are absolutely manipulating emotion with that. Very powerful tools. Thank you for asking that. A terrific question. But again, yes, we don't have really time for that in this class. I wish, but we have too much to talk about as it is. But light is another amazing thing. All right, now, in terms of the activity, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do. And this is part of what I was getting some questions earlier. In terms of my final scene, what do I need to do? For your final scene, you're going to use that same Gesundheit scene that we have, that we downloaded last class. You know, the desk with the window and you're in that little room. We're going to be using that scene again. What you're going to do is import 4 assets that you built over the course of this month. Any 4 that you modeled, no blockouts. They have to be modeled assets. So anything that you turned in that you actually physically modeled using the big 3 tools, multi-cut, insert edge loop, extrude, those are the tools you can use. Now, do you have to use assets that you UV mapped? No, you do not. You can put any 4 assets in there you wish. They have to be 4 different assets. You can't have the same one 4 times, but you got to have 4 different assets. Can you UV something you didn't UV map previously? Absolutely. UV map whatever you want to. Can I include an ambient occlusion pass? Please, if you wish, do it, because it only makes your work look better. Do I have to do an ambient occlusion pass? No, you do not. We showed you how to do that because it was critical you understood why good UV layout is important. I can't tell you how important it is, and you believe me unless you see it firsthand. Yeah, bad UV layout messes up my AO pass, so I can tell right away this is something I need to get better at. Does that make sense? The why is important, and that's why we did it. But I am not grading you on ambient occlusion. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
Do we have to, having the bulk of
Yes.
do we have to UV map things that we actually submitted in previous turn-ins? So I've got a model that I made in week 1.
Yeah, as long as you modeled it, that's fine. You have to turn in, I believe it's 4 UV mapped assets. I have to double check the assignment. But I believe it is 4. You have to UV map 4 objects. Again, any 4 objects that were not blockouts. They have to be modeled assets.
But they don't specifically have that. It says from previous turn-ins.
Yes.
An extra model that I didn't turn in before.
Oh, you mean like, but you built it during this class period and it's one of the objects that we gave you to build. Oh yeah, no, that's totally fine. What I was concerned with is you're like, oh, but I built this X-Wing and it looks awesome. Can I put that in there? Unfortunately, no. You can only use the assets that we provided you with to model.
Put more than the 4 in?
No, I'm sorry, just the 4.
Stay in the box.
I know, yeah, I'm sorry. It tends to get a little bit too crowded and cluttered when we put too many things in there, and then it just looks like a big pile of stuff. So what we're trying to do here is, A, get you to use composition to sell, because that's the bottom line. It's got to look great. I got to catch somebody's eye. So I'm building all the same things as everyone else. How do I make mine look epic? That's the goal. And then 2, I don't want anybody to be like, well, you know, I don't have as many models, therefore that mine's not going to look as good. If everybody's got the same requirements, just 4 assets, and everybody's building the same groups of things, that's an even playing field. So what sets you apart is ability, skill, creativity. That's what makes you better than the next guy. And that will eventually equate to work, employment, doing what you want to do. Because oftentimes, it's the person who's willing to go just a little bit further that beats out the one that's not. It's sad, but it's true. That is the reality of this line of work. This is not I go to class, I do my work, I get my paper, and Pixar and ILM fight for me. Not even close. You have to think of this school and these classes as like an arena. We are training you, we're giving you the tools and the weapons so that you can go out and give your best fight for that job you want, because it is a fight. There are a lot of people who want into this field, and not as many jobs as there are people, which means you are going to have to beat someone out for this job. So it doesn't matter how nice your smile is. It doesn't matter if you've got a good phone voice. If you don't win them over with your portfolio, you might not get the chance for a phone interview. And Gesundheit, also, little known fact, when it comes to getting a job, it's not, oh, we like his portfolio, yeah, he's pretty good on the phone, let's hire him. The next step is they give you an art test. When they decide, when they pick the few people out of the however many want this job, they pick a few. They give you guys what they call an art test. And the art test is, hey, I want you to build me, you know, a Sherman tank. I want keep it under 800 triangles. You're allowed 2 texture maps of 256 by 256, and you've got 38 hours to do it. Good luck. And everybody who is invited to do this does this art test, and they look at the submissions, and then they choose who they're willing to even talk to. Does that make sense? You have.
Because it feels like a speech right before he screams this.
This is not Sparta. This is madness. But the point is, you have to be prepared for this fight. And I'm not trying to scare you at all. I'm not a scare you kind of guy. I am a red pill guy, though. I'm going to tell you what's up, what I've seen, and what I know, so that you can make better choices along the path. I'm not going to tell you anything that I don't believe to be true, and I'm not going to smoke screen and put sunshine on it. I think reality is your best ally. Does that make sense? I just want you guys to be ready, because that's who I am. I take it very seriously. When you go through my class, my name is on you. And I say you're ready for the next thing, and you are on the path to going where you want to go. That's why I'm pretty serious about this stuff. Does that make sense? It's fun. I really enjoy it. But my responsibility is to give you the best tools and the best chance to get what you came here to get. And I take that seriously.
So what if someone doesn't know these references?
Doesn't know the references? Sparta? Well, you just have to watch 300. It's a really good film. I got to be honest with you. I'm not a violent guy. I don't like movies that are just purely violent. But if you watch that movie, 300, that is the most beautiful depiction of violence I've ever seen. It is gorgeous, gorgeous. And again, I'm not a violent guy. I don't really like violence. But wow, did they do a good job with that one.
Kind of off topic, how did demo reels look if you were wanting to be a video?
Well, every demo reel is going to look different. It's going to be showing off different things. And what I would strongly recommend is if there's a field you're already interested in, start doing some Google searches. You just type in rigging demo reel 2017. Look at what they're making right now. What are they showing off? Why are they showing off what they're showing off? What's working for this demo reel that I don't really like about that one? And I want to make sure mine is more like that one. You don't have to be the strongest modeler. Yeah. Oh, and let me tell you, the class used to be structured differently, and believe me, I know exactly where you're coming from on this. There are a whole slew of really cool jobs on this CG production pipeline, and each one sort of, it's almost like finding your superpower. You know those TV shows that you watch where it's like the really hard, nasty, grumpy guy becomes the thing, you know, and the girl becomes invisible. Maybe she's a little self-conscious. So there's sort of an element of you that determines what your superpower is going to be when you get exposed to gamma radiation. Work with me on this one. It's a weird one, but trust me, it's going to be a good ride. In terms of those magical powers and those skills that you develop, the skills on the CG production pipeline will speak to you in some disciplines, and others you won't feel it as much. I like almost all of them because they're all like cool in a different way. But you may find, oh, I'm really interested in rigging. I love this. Why is there not a school with just rigging? You know, because this is the part I like. That's what we want you to find out. That's why you're on this journey at this school, so we can teach you the different things. Exactly, and you determine what's for you. You know what I mean? You look at any band, lead singers, loud, obnoxious, and self-absorbed. Bass player, quiet, reserved, and very thoughtful. Why is that? They tend to be that way. You migrate towards the kinds of things that you do because you're interested in them. They appeal to you. Does that make sense? You don't get loudmouth, obnoxious bass players. For some reason, they're the cool, laid-back guy. So point being, you will find your thing. But what I would say is learn all of these things, because just because this isn't what you want to do doesn't mean you shouldn't know how to do this. Don't turn it off, because everything you know how to do makes you a more powerful player. Does that make sense? Because I got to be honest with you, it's great when you can show your demo reel and the very last frame is everything by me. You know, that's pretty epic. So what I would say is understand everything, determine how they interact and how they work together, because that's important, because we are a team sport. Realize that you need to be great at one thing and pretty damn good at a complementary thing and just competent at the rest. But the more you can do, the more valuable you are to a company. By far, hands down. The smaller the company, the more hats they're going to ask you to wear. And that's a good thing. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, off topic, but I love the question. That's a great one. And for those of you who are delving into that book by Brenda and Ian, Brenda Brathwaite and Ian, I forget his last name. But that book will talk at length about the kinds of things we're talking about. So if you have questions, be looking at that book. And that was another one of those discussion things we did together. Because those discussions are to help augment your learning. They don't have points associated with them, but they could be the difference between success and not based on the knowledge we've given you. It's not busy work. That's really stuff that'll help you, and that's why it's there. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So let's take a look at this process. What I want you to do is open up your that scene that we had yesterday of the desk and everything, and I want you to import 4 objects, and let's just play a little bit, move the camera around, and try to tell a story with these images. And Brian and I will walk around and see how you're doing. And there's no skill check today. That's my gift to you guys. No skill check today. Only 10 of them. Only 10. But the benefit of them is if you do them all, that raises your grade by a full letter, because it's free 10 points. Who doesn't want free 10 points and an increase of letter grade? That's pretty fabulous. All right, so Brian and I walk around, open up that scene, and we're going to see how you're doing. Again, import your 4 objects. If you're going to be using your ambient occlusion, be sure to bring those textures over with you and plug those into the source images folder, because that's where mine's going to be looking for it. Set your project to the file folder system, and everything will be okay. All right? I do. Everything will be okay. If you do those things, everything will be all right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you can create an ambient occlusion for anything you want to, but you have to have a good UV layout to do it. You can't just run ambient occlusion on it, you know what I mean? You have to UV map it. But yeah, if you want to create an ambient occlusion for whatever you want, go ahead. Okay.
I mean, all the UV shells are inside and they're not overlapping, and I don't get what else to do.
Well, if you take a look at the self-grade document and look at the UV section of what we're grading on, that's what makes good UV layout, and that's why we're grading for those elements. So things like make sure your shells are all facing the right way, blue. Make sure that the stretching is minimized, happy squares. Make sure the shells are not overlapping each other. Make sure none of the shells are outside the 0 to 1. All of those elements that we are grading on, that's what makes good UV layout. Does that make sense? And that's why those are graded elements. We want to see that you know what those things are and you can recognize them and move towards better results. And the good news is you're going to be UV mapping for the rest of your time here at Full Sail, so you're going to get better at it. So this is just the first time, which is always tough, but you'll get better. What's that?
Ambient occlusion. Less intense contact.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping ambient occlusion over, but for some reason it won't let me.
Right, because the deadline for that is already passed.
Also, like the Maya process. Deadline for the skill check?
Yeah. Once the due date has passed, you can't submit. But if you did the work before the deadline, bring the file to lab. How you guys doing? Is this making sense in terms of what we're looking for? Yes.
Yeah, we're redoing the final team because the last time we did it, I was struggling to get the P3 model turned in, so I didn't really get a chance to do it.
I had a feeling you were working in class. That is the worst possible use of class time, is working on other assignments.
Well,
I know, but that's what I mean. It's you miss out on all the information. What seems like a tremendous time saver, now you're like, okay, so now I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, the good news is we record the lectures and they are posted so you can watch it. And what I'd rather you did is watch that video and have a notebook with you while you're watching it and write down everything the questions on. And I'll address those because it's nearly impossible for me to give you the 2-hour lecture again. So take a look at the tutorial or take a look at the video of the lecture and then let me know what your questions are and I'll address those. Does that make sense? Yeah, no, it's okay. It's a call. You made a decision. You're like, I needed to do this, so this is how I'm going to do it. But then there are repercussions for the call. You know what I mean? And if I sit down here and just help you, I'm now ignoring everybody else in here who needs help, who was on task. Does that make sense? I'm not giving you a hard time. It's totally your decision, and you were old enough to do that. Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
It sounds like one of the models, the geometry is kind of off, so I have to fix that before clicking it there? Or
I would if I were you. You don't have to fix anything because this is really about lighting and rendering, but you do want to show your work off in your best light. So if you can fix something that didn't turn out so great, you can do that. But what I would say is don't spend too much time doing that because then you might not have enough time to do your work. You know what I mean? So don't get distracted. But if you really feel like, you know, I really want to use this asset, but it didn't turn out as good as it could, I think I can make it a little bit better and it won't take too long.
The geometry is messed up.
Mm-hmm.
The object when you look at it without it is perfect.
Mm-hmm. Well, but what you have to be aware of is like bad edge flow and that kind of thing. That kind of stuff shows up with lighting. You know what I mean? Like it might look okay in a hardware render, but when you put light on geometry, that's when you start to see problems. Does that make sense? It's just the way the render is calculated. So again, that's a decision you have to make. And could you bring the geometry in, you know, render it and just see how it looks? And like, you can't really tell. Then you got away with one. You know what I mean? So, but if you can see it and you really want that object, then you're going to have to fix it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Good question, though.
Unrelated question. I'm doing the UV mapping on
Yeah.
the hockey bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the curvature of it, it's very difficult to get even size squares the entire way up.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather I have effectively a single seam the whole way up the bottle, or would you rather I have a bunch of separate shells?
Well, here's what I would say. Because the way we're looking at this object, I would probably go with
Much smaller squares.
right.
Together.
Well, again, a great question to ask yourself is, what do I need this thing to do? And ultimately, I'm assuming you want to use an AO path, which means if you have multiple shells, you're going to end up with a lot of seams that you're going to have to fix later on. So in that instance, it's probably better for you to attach those to each other because you're going to get a better AO path generation.
Even though it might be more difficult to paint a texture for it later.
Well, here's the thing.
Because you would have.
If you are painting a texture for it later, let's say there's text running down the neck of the bottle, and that's where the distortion is taking place, that might be a problem. Does that make sense? And then you might decide to go a different way. But since all we're doing here is ambient occlusion, you might be able to get away with it. Does that make sense? So, and that's why I encourage you guys to think your way through what's the end goal for this thing. That will help you make those good decisions. How's it going?
Pretty good. Just important stuff.
Oh, good. Very nice. Good, good. Bringing stuff in. Rendering images. Good, good, good. You guys.
I saw your video.
Yes.
You know when you were having that problem when you were switching from one, like you were having a problem switching from.
Yes.
I'm having that same problem. Like
It's the craziest thing.
It's not as fast as I used to. Like when I click here,
Right.
like it doesn't let me go.
Have you shut down your computer recently, or you?
No.
Okay, that's the problem. Just like we need sleep, or we start getting crazy. Laptops get crazy.
Yeah,
Applications get crazy.
When I look at my computer,
Uh-uh.
it's so fast.
Yeah, try shutting it down, because what that does is that clears the memory and the RAM, and it basically allows your computer to kind of take a breath and then start back up. And I know it's annoying to wait for it to start up again, but trust me, it works so much better. With me, for some strange reason, when I'm doing a screen recording, that's when it was glitching out. I'm like,
Did you just kind of do glass, like the magnifying glass? Because I saw when you were doing like you were
Yep.
recording.
You're going to have to play with the material. So create a material, and it's going to be shinier, so you're going to be using a different material. And look through its attributes, and you're looking for something called refraction. Yep. All right, good, good. Looks like you guys are headed down the path to get this stuff done. That's awesome. Well, in terms of the glass, you know, you're looking at transparency in terms of its behavior. I mean, you did put a thong on there, so that's going to make it shiny. But refraction is what magnifies. But that piece of glass doesn't necessarily magnify.
So it's right material for the glass.
You can use any material for the glass. It's up to you. Yeah. Again, if you take a look at the specularity of the material, that'll tell you what it will look like when it renders. And what I would say is do a test render and see what you're getting. If you don't like it, you can switch to a different material. Does that make sense? So it's a bit of a, there's not a, this is how you make glass, because there are many different kinds of glass. No, it's okay. So you got it. What's that?
It's just my ear. I get cold and.
Oh, I hate that when you're congested. Yeah, no, that's a bummer. I hate that too. Yeah, yeah, because we did rendering workflow, right? We talked about do a render, see what it looks like, select just a small area, render that, see what it looks like, make an adjustment, render that, see what it looks like. Eventually, you'll find something that works for you. How's it going, guys? You having fun?
Yeah.
Good.
I'm trying to import the objects that I could.
Good, good. Yep, line them up. How are you guys doing? Good, good. Not good. Right. Well, that's okay. Like I said, it's about sort of finding a nice shot. You know, think about in terms of your camera placement. If your camera is down low, looking up a little bit, you're empowering it. You're making it more epic and exciting. If you're looking down at an object, it's almost like you're observing it, sort of like a voyeur, just watching things happen, you know, which makes you feel more powerful. When you're at the same level as an object, it's almost like you're in there with it, you know, like a reality show. You are in there with those things. So what you have to think about is, what am I trying to say about these things? What story am I telling? And then that helps you kind of figure, what's a good camera angle? Does that make sense? Yeah, you're welcome. How's yours going?
Pretty good.
It's not under your recent ones? Oh, okay. Well, you may have to dig around to find that one.
that extreme, but yeah.
How you guys doing? Good? Oh, good. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Everything I actually see.
Well, it has to be 4, unfortunately. Could you do a 5er for yourself? Absolutely. But yeah, it's got to be 4 for the one you're doing for me. Yep. Yep. Therein lies the challenge.
Yeah.
Yay! Yay! UV mapping.
So, like, on what you guys really want? Like, do you guys want, like, the checkers the same size, or?
Yeah. Yep. Again, the self grade goes over everything you're looking for. I know you don't want to go look at that thing, but I'm telling you.
And you answered the question here.
Yeah.
I want to ask you myself anyway.
Sure.
So like the funnel models, they look okay. So like I used those back when I didn't know you could use too many sensors.
Yeah.
A lot, and it's a little rigid on some point that you
Sure.
can kind of see it.
Mhm.
Are you guys like gonna dock points if like the model is like a little off in some parts? Like I mean, I know that light shows off on it, and you can kind of see it. But
Right, exactly, and that's what I was talking about when I was over there with those guys. The fact that somewhat less than ideal geometry in terms of edge flow and so forth, and the shapes of the faces, that kind of thing, really shows up as soon as you put light on it. And that's why we work so hard at making sure we're being very light, clean, and efficient with the stuff we're building, because once it gets here, that's where you start to see the problems. So like we're at the end of our production pipeline, and somebody's going, hey, who the hell modeled this thing? You know what I mean? And you don't want that to happen to you, so you always build.
I'm not the strongest model.
That's okay.
Some of my stuff,
That's all right.
It looks pretty good overall, but like if
Mhm.
you like go real in.
Sure.
So,
Sure. But in time, do you think you'll get better?
I like to think so.
Absolutely. I guarantee it.
It's a week-long break we're gonna have.
Mhm.
I have a lot of time to sit down and play around with mine. I've been watching tutorials.
Good, good.
There's certain things I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, just really quick, I'll take your time. Like
No.
with like the Gatorade bottle. Oh,
Mhm.
here's like a perfect example. I feel like
Mhm.
there's like an etch in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like doing something like that in my like it escapes me.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing. If you were doing a detail like that on this bottle, it would depend on where is this thing being used? How is it going to be utilized? So, for example, if this model was going to be in a shot where the liquid or that detail had to be physically part of the surface,
Right.
like maybe there's going to be a water droplet that runs down the side of it or something, and we would actually see it, then we would have to actually model that detail out of there. Now, might we go about a different way? Maybe it's just a visual element. Like it's not reacting with anything, but it is a complex detail that's part of that bottle. Okay, then maybe we're talking about using a normal map to create that kind of shape change because it's very complex.
One of the level 3 is like a Gatorade bottle.
Yes,
Gatorade had like a lightning bolt on it.
which is very hard to model.
Yeah, so that because obviously we had to model that.
Yep.
So, like,
You would just do your best.
Like how would you model that?
You
like etch out the shape.
literally what you end up having to do is use your multi-cut tool and cut in the shape you need. You can extrude it to get it to come in. You could delete that face and grab those edges and do an extrusion to pull it in if you're trying not to affect the surface as much. But you know what I mean? That is that's why it's a level 3.
I figured
Because
that.
it's hard.
I kept myself, is it multi-cut tool that you can make the
Yeah.
but that didn't seem right.
No, it's based on what you know how to do, that is the solution. But again, is there more than one way to make that detail? Oh, of course there is. But you don't know all those things yet.
Do you know what we're learning in our next class? Like the model creation?
Oh, yes. We're going to talk about that next.
I want to get better at that. It's hard.
Absolutely.
I feel like it's because we got like all this monitoring we have to do. I was getting lost in all that. So it was getting hard to try to do a lot of complex objects.
Yes.
Different parts.
No, absolutely. It is very challenging. This is a very hard month to have a great deal of work to do for Art 1, as well as having to learn a brand new application you've never touched before.
I don't want to fall behind like everyone else is getting
No.
it. They're making the models, and I'm sitting here trying to like
But what you have to realize is everybody learns at a different rate of speed, and there's nothing wrong with the rate you're learning. But what you have to say is, okay, if it takes me longer to get something, well, then that just means I have to work a little bit harder than everybody else. But this is what I want to be able to do, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because I know exactly that's the big problem. Because I know when I was learning this stuff, I came from a traditional art background, not a digital one. So like this was like voodoo to me. And it's very scary. And to be honest with you, like my friends are all going out. Hey, we're going out. We're going to get some pizza and some beers. And I'm like, I can't. I got to stay here. This is not done. I'm not happy with it. And you know, at first, all my work was terrible. You know, my classmates would laugh at my stuff because it was awful. In fact, one of my classmates said the best job I could ever get would be a tester for the application because I could get it to blow up in ways that nobody else could. So they're like, yeah, it's a way of saying you're terrible. But my concept work was good. And what would happen is people would see my concept work and go, wow, that's a really cool idea. I mean, your execution is terrible, but your concept is good. So then they started coming to me and saying, hey, could you do some concept work for me? Could you design? I got to do this assignment, and I don't really have any ideas. What do you got? So they would come to me for concept work, and I would, you know, give them my concept, my ideas, and then they would help me a little bit with what I was working on. And then slowly I got better. And then what was really funny was there was a point where I got better than they were. So as soon as my 3D started to catch up with my traditional, then they hated me because I was now competition, whereas before I was just amusing. It's more time. And that's the good news. It's not like magic will make you better. It's time.
It's only also hard because it's hard to find specific things for Maya to learn. Like all I can really do is just watch people model things and then kind of like pick up little things that they do.
Exactly. Get little tricks, little things here, there that you learn, but ultimately just sit down and make stuff. Pick what you want to make and make it. You're going to learn the most from that. Yeah. Yeah, you know, if X-Wings make you excited, go find some good reference images because I showed you how to do that. Yeah. Go find some good reference images of an X-Wing and build it. You know what I mean? Because if you're interested in the thing you're building, you'll try harder at it. You know, these are things you had to build, so they're not as exciting. When you're building what you want to build, you are all in. You know what I mean? For the longest investment of your time and interest. So that's what you want.
Well, it's a good thing to take time to do that.
It does. Honestly, some of the best work I did was that when I was supposed to be on break. You know, all my friends would go goof off. Hey, we're at the pool. We're drinking beers and chasing girls. And I'm like, well, I'm at home working. You know, we'd come back from break and everybody would be telling stories about all the fun stuff that they did. And I'd be like, yeah, look what I did. Boom. And like, oh, they get mad at me because they're like, you did that? I hate you. So, you know, it is a sacrifice. Don't get me wrong. If it's worth it to you, then you do it. You know what I mean? Then you do it. That's all there is to it. You're very welcome. No, anytime. Yes.
Where is that video? I need it.
Oh, it's on the 3DF server. Did they not connect you to that?
3DF server what? What you talking about, Willis?
Click in the background.
Like over here?
Yeah, just click in the background so the Finder comes up. Go connect to server.
There's a go button.
Oh yeah. Go. Here, look on my screen. Connect to server. Nope. And then for 3DF, this is the address, and it's kind of like a phone number. And you have to be on campus to access it, so it's not a remote access thing. Yeah, / student V as in Victor, filer, / 3DF. And then you're going to have to connect, and you're going to use your org sync stuff.
That's all you get.
Yep. That's correct. Yes, it's your Connect login. And it works kind of like a phone number. If you're one letter off, it doesn't work.
Will this only work while I'm on campus?
That is correct. It's part of the intranet, not the internet. It's like, imagine there's a dome over Full Sail, yeah. All right. What did I want to talk about? There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. I don't remember. Oh! Now I remember. Oops.
I like this online student. Well, I was hoping around the room they had some questions and others have answered.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Honestly, I love the fact that they're working together.
Yeah.
And if there's some way that I could make them work together,
Yeah.
I would. Because this is definitely a team sport, and the more minds you bring to bear on a problem, the more readily the problem gets resolved.
Oh, yeah.
And I wish I could make you guys work together. You know, hey, everybody over at, you know, April's house, we're having pizza, and we're going to work out all of our problems. So, but that's a great way to get the work done. And unfortunately, though, I can't make you guys all hang out and work together. But in the Google Hangout, you can all hang out and work together. So again, use that venue as a means of bringing many minds together. And it's as much a teaching tool as a community bonding and learning tool. So, you know, I want you guys to use that in both of those capacities.
What are these EX files? Like it made one for every EXR file.
Oh, it must be a text document, possibly. Try to open it up with Word or something, or text edit. All right. Okay. So, guys, one thing I do want you to jump on. You know what? Somebody was asking me something, and I wanted to talk about that. Oh, model creation. Thank you for reminding me. I just wanted to talk a little bit about model creation for you guys, just to sort of prepare you for what's going to be coming next for you guys. Not necessarily online, because they will have a different class after this one, but for those of you in the local class, you're going to go right into model creation. So I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about model creation so you can go into it prepared, because again, I don't like surprises. Well, I like surprises, just not when it comes to education. Education and career surprises are typically not good. But what I do want to do is talk a little bit about some ideas that are going to be in model creation that are important for you guys to understand, some of which you actually stumbled on a little bit while you were in class with me today, this month as well. One of those ideas is the idea of modeling for smooth. And I know you guys kind of stumbled onto that in some instances, and I just want to clarify for you what the heck that's all about and what's happening. Now, some of you notice that when I select an object and I press 3 on my keyboard, it seems to change shape. It sort of melts away. And what's happening here is when you press 3, you are asking Maya to show you what your geometry would look like if you used the smooth tool on it twice, or subdivided your geometry twice. And to kind of help you understand that, and to go back, you just press 1 and you go back to your base mesh mode. But to help you understand what we're talking about there, if I take this cube and I go to mesh and I choose smooth, and then I go to mesh and I choose smooth again, you see it looks like a sphere. And if you look at these objects next to each other, they look identical. All right? If you select them, this looks more dense than that. So you might be under the impression that, oh, this is lighter geometry than that, and I have the same smoothness. Huzzah! But that is sort of a visual misrepresentation. In terms of the way Maya calculates geometry, Maya calculates this piece exactly the same way as it calculates this piece. There's no savings in faces, as it were, by using the 3 key to make your geometry appear more smooth. Does that make sense? It calculates it as if it was this dense. So the question becomes then, what's the purpose of that? What's that 3 key for? Well, when you guys get into some more advanced modeling techniques, one of the things you're going to learn about is this process called modeling for smooth. And modeling for smooth is the idea that you model your object with the full intention of smoothing it just prior to the render. And that makes it look a little bit more smooth. Again, the calculation time is going to go up because you're basically smoothing your geometry twice in terms of the edge flow. Now, in terms of this process, it's kind of like sort of taking sandpaper to the whole object. So what you end up having to do is creating what we call holding edges. Now, holding edges do, as their name implies, they help hold edges together. So, for example, I can use my Insert Edge Loop tool and put some edges on this cube. And then now, when I press 3 on my keyboard, some areas melt away while others hold firm. And what you find out is that you can literally change the amount of softening that takes place by the placement of the holding edges. Does that make sense? So again, you're modeling with the intention of hitting 3 right before render time to smooth it. So what you have to do is strategically build in nice edge looping to accommodate the smoothing as you'd like it to appear. Now, something that you have to be very careful of, because this happens a lot with first-time modelers when they're modeling, is they realize that the 3 key makes things look smoother. So then they're like, oh, cool, let me make some modifications to this. You know, oh, you know what? I need to model a chair, you know, a really mod-looking chair for this hip 70s bar. And look at how quickly and easily I can create this really hip-looking chair. But what happens is when you press 1, you realize you've created catastrophically bad geometry as a result. And that's why it's okay to tweak a little bit in 3, but you don't want to model in 3. You want to leave it in 1. The reason being, when it comes to UV mapping geometry, we UV map our base 1 mesh geometry. When it comes to rigging, we rig our base 1 mesh geometry. So the fact that it looks okay in 3 does not make it okay. You literally, it has to look good in 1 in order for it to be light efficient, well-performing geometry. Does that make sense? So even if you're building an extremely complex object with all kinds of crazy detail on it, you are still going to make sure that your base 1 mesh is light, clean, efficient, and made of good shapes in terms of the faces. And again, predominantly quadded depending on how you're going to be using it. So the idea that we need to be efficient, we need to be light, we have to have good looking edge flow, you know, nice shaped faces, that will never go away. That is a modeling thing as long as there's modeling with polygons going on. Does that make sense? So no matter how complex the object, you're still going to have to remember those things that we learned in here. But can you use those skills and tools in conjunction with other stuff to make even more elaborate and detailed stuff? Oh, absolutely. And that's what you're going to get in model creation. Let's take it up a notch. Well, more than a notch. Let's take it up a bunch of notches, because you guys are going to be modeling a lot of models in model creation, as you would imagine. Now, to give you an idea of what to expect, let me open up a scene for you so you can see a model creation project. And it looks like some of my material did not come through. So I'm going to assign a Lambert to it, just so we can see everything. But what I want to show you is this is a model creation project. And it's a medieval room. And there's a lot of stuff in here. You're probably seeing, look at all this stuff I'm going to have to make. And let me get in here on this candlestick. Let me get in there. All right. Now, you might think, holy cow, how am I going to build that thing? But look at this piece right here. Could you build that piece? Yes, you could. So this object is composed of this piece 4 times. So what kind of tools could I use there? My duplicate with transform, mirror, those tools would totally help you do that. All right? This piece right here, which object did we build that somewhat resembles that? The candlestick, right? You built the candlestick, you can do this too. So if I make this and I make that, can I put them together? What tool do we use for that? I can use Booleans. I can use my target weld. I can merge my vertices. You can do this stuff. The key is don't be overwhelmed by its magnitude. Break it down to the little things. So for example, again, if you look at this, where's that thing? This armoire back here. This is crazy busy. I mean, that is an epic piece, that thing right there. But if you get super close to it, you'll see it is made of a whole bunch of very makeable pieces. Does that make sense? You can do this work. You absolutely can do this work. You can even do it now. But the biggest piece of this puzzle that I'm hoping you're picking up on, time. Time. This is the thing that you can't control. You already have the skills to do this work, but you're going to have to make the time to do this work, because to do this much work, it just takes more time. Does that make sense?
How do you get faster at anything?
And practice is the key. Practice makes you faster. So the more you model, the quicker you're going to get at it. Again, use those hotkeys, use the hot box, use those marking menus. All of that stuff will help you go more quickly. And the more you do it, the better and the faster you get.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Scott.
Can we turn too many curved objects into more edges to sharpen it up?
Can we turn, I'm not sure I understand that question. Do you know where he's going with that?
Yeah, I think, you know how you smooth things out? I think he wants to roughen things up.
Oh, go the other way with it. Well, technically you can, but it's really not a good idea. There's a tool in Maya called the reduce tool, and you can literally select an object and say, reduce my geometry by 50%. And Maya will do it, but it will create a train wreck of geometry. If you want to make something lighter, really your better bet is to remove the edge loops physically using the delete edge, delete vert, edge vert, edge vert, vert, edge loop. There's literally a tool that deletes an edge and the vertice as well. But again, if you've got to do it, that's the way to do it. But what I would say is, if you are building models the way we showed you how to build them, typically you don't have to reduce them. Usually you've been very light and efficient with your model from go, and that's not a necessity. So more than likely, you're going to be fine. It is way easier to take a simple thing and make it more complex than to take a complex thing and make it more simple, because that's going to be a fight for sure. It's a good question, but starting with efficiency, build light, and add detail in a series of passes as you go through it, that's how you don't get into that situation. But are there some instances where you might be given a model and somebody says, hey, can you lighten this up because I want it to be a game asset? that might happen.
Yeah.
You know, and that's going to be you pulling out edge loops.
Any final things you want to tell the online?
Oh no, are we running out of time? I'm always out of time. I wish I had more time. What do I want to tell online? So again, for that last turn in, make sure you're taking a close look at the self-grade document. My hope is that you guys are starting to realize that that's the key to doing well. The presentation scene, that whole thing that you're turning in, is what we've been doing in class all week. So you should have that down. I'm not even worried about that. The UVs is going to be the harder of the two things. For me personally, I would say, again, make sure you're blocking out a good chunk of time for that UV mapping, because it is a way slower process than you and I would both like. But that's the reality of good UVs, is it takes time. So make sure you're doing that. Look at that self-grade document. Follow the instructions in there, because really the solution to having a good grade is using that document. And I feel like if at any point somebody didn't do as well as they would have liked to on an assignment, it's because they didn't really utilize that document to guide their process. They just kind of did what they thought was right, or what they thought they remembered from class, and missed a bunch of stuff. And I know I hate to see that, and I don't like not giving great grades. I really love to give great grades. That makes me actually very happy. But you've got to pay attention to those details, because it will hurt you. Not only in this class, but every class after this and into the industry. And, you know, make your mistakes here, learn from them, and get better, because when you're out there and you make a mistake, you might not be able to find as much work as you'd like. So your name is the most important thing you have, and you've got to protect that. You want your name associated with good work, hard work, following instructions. Those are the attributes that they want from you. But that's a great question. Thank you. All righty, guys. So the last thing that I have to ask you to do before you take off today is we do have a class evaluation. I don't know if you've seen this thing.